Hi, and welcome everyone to this week's photo critique at the Brian Peterson School of Photography. My name is Mike Shaw, and I teach the Star Trails and Night Photography course. As you know, we have 5 images that have been selected for review, and what I'm going to do is to go through each one of them and point out what I think might be some aspects of the image that could be potentially improved, followed by several aspects that I think are strengths of each image, of which there are many. So we're going to go ahead and get started then with this first image that's titled Venice Canal, that was sent in by Nina MC. And the exposure information we have is the aperture was f5.6 and the ISO is 800, and this was made at a shutter speed of 1/13 of a second. And there's no information on the camera or the lens. But when we look at this image, the first thing that jumps out to me immediately are the colors. What we have here is the phrase color salad. I mean, we have so much vibrancy, and the variety of colors is just a really happy, lively, full of life scene. The strong compositional element, of course, is the bridge within the scene, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But what's curious to me about this image is, despite the bright, lively colors, there's this almost eerie tension or contrast in the scene that arises from its absolute stillness and the lack of human life in here. We have the calm water. We don't have anyone's heads appearing from any of the windows. And so one way to perhaps address this, if it were possible, if access to the bridge is allowed, would be to position somebody right in the middle of the bridge, right where I'm indicating with the cursor, right here. We could have an individual holding a cluster of balloons. We could have a couple holding hands and kissing. We could have a young family, an elderly couple, really anyone who would appear in the center of the bridge and really add a punch to this scene. It would be kind of cool actually to have someone in a gondola going underneath the bridge. It looks like there may be such a boat right here coming underneath the bridge, and then handing something up to or down from the person on the bridge. That would be kind of a nice touch. But in any event, adding somebody here I think would add an element to the photograph. A second feature to add some dynamism to the scene would be to have someone on a bicycle, if that were possible, going to the left or to the right across the bridge. And the nice thing about this is that given the 1/13 of a second shutter speed, the bicyclist would produce a nice blur, so that we could still tell that it was a bicyclist, but there'd be this blur that would clearly convey the sense of motion while still retaining its identity as a bicyclist. So those were a couple of compositional things, and the only other things that come to my mind is that there may be, it's very difficult to tell because of the structures, there may be a slight tilt to this building that could be cropped away. I'm going to leave it for now because, again, the bridge looks more or less upright. But the one thing that catches my eye is this branch in the upper right-hand corner that I'm circling. And if it were possible, just while this picture were being made, to maybe take a few steps to the left so that this branch didn't protrude into the yellow building, I think that might be less of a distraction. So now, in terms of the strengths of this image, are the choice of colors and the choice of vibrancy and the post-processing to bring out those colors really stand out to me. I really like the reds and the yellows and the blues, that combination, the greens and the reds, and just everything put together really comes together nicely. But the real strength to me of this image is the coupling of the dominant vertical lines as the compositional element between the rain gutters and the buildings and the windows and the bridge and the reflections, coupled with the portrait orientation of this photograph as a whole. You know, it's always good to take a landscape image right after the portrait, but in this case, I think that the portrait orientation is certainly the way to go. To have the vertical lines leading up and out at the top of the image. So those are my comments. It's a beautiful image. It's just full of life, and I just think having an added person in on the bridge would add a little something to it. But just as it is, it's very calm and in many ways and very appealing. So thank you for sending that in, Nina. All right, our next image is almost on the opposite side of the color spectrum. This is a very strong black and white image that was sent in by Marv Kaminsky. Marv made the shot with an Olympus OMD EM1 camera and an M12-40 f2.8 lens. This was made at an overall exposure value of -2, 2 stops down, with an aperture of f8 and a shutter speed of 1/400th of a second. And I'm guessing, looking at the scene, which I am guessing was taken in the late afternoon, early evening, maybe around 5 or 6 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that the ISO was probably in the 100 to 200, maybe 400 ISO range. Now, let me read Marv's description along with the image. He says, photo of Bridalveil Falls in Yosemite was taken in color and converted to black and white. I felt that the tonal range in black and white brought out the detail in the falls and made it stand out from the background. I agree. I used a fast shutter speed to capture the detail of the cascading falls. All right, well, so agree with Marv's assessment, and this is a beautiful black and white conversion. Now, one thing that has happened, which happens often in black and white conversions, is the color contrast between the foliage and the background, and much of this foreground is totally lost and becomes kind of this flat, featureless gray area that really doesn't add anything to the photograph and in some ways detracts from it. So my suggestion would be to transform this composition into a portrait composition, as I'll do here, which is done simply by producing a crop, activating the crop tool, and then by holding my thumb on the shift button while I'm moving the cursor to the right. At some point, Photoshop suddenly realizes, oh, Mike wants to do a portrait orientation, in which case I let go, and we now have a correctly proportioned portrait crop. Now, in my mind, the sort of crop that is the most appealing is something along these lines, where we've removed unnecessary gray sky, we've removed all of this unnecessary foreground flatness, and what we're left behind is a scene that features the waterfall and leaning tower, which is the name of this rock. So I'll go ahead and implement the crop, and this is the result of what we have here. So we'll talk a few more in a minute about the strengths of this image. There might be some benefit to removing this set of trees, a tree branch, but certainly there's from a compositional point of view, when setting up the shot, it might be worth considering maybe taking a step or two to the left to move this protruding pine branch off to the right so we can see this nice clean face of the rock. If we decided we wanted to try removing the tree branch, let's just see how that might look. So I'm just going to draw the lasso tool around that and then go to Edit, Fill, Content Aware Fill. There's a color adaptation option. Whoa, that took away the top of the mountain, so we're not going to like that. So we'll just undo that change. And let's try a slightly different crop. Let's try just removing this part of it to see what happens. So we do this, and we do the same Content Aware Fill, and we get this result here, which is still not perfect by any means, but the idea is to produce a clean ridge line which follows this nice glaciated value U-shaped curve that John Muir was the first to find in Yosemite, actually, and deduce the glaciated nature of the evolution of the basin. But in any event, let me now turn to the strengths of this image that I think are particularly appealing. So the first thing has to do directly with the contrast that Marv correctly noted. The whites of the waterfall contrast beautifully with the grays of the rock. We also have the very dark foreground grays, the middle grays of the middle part of the image, and then the lighter tones of the sky. But to me, the magnificence of this image is really communicated by the contrast between the waterfall and the leaning tower. We have the fluid, transient, dynamic motion of the downward moving white water immediately juxtaposed with the immobile, strong, sturdy, rigid, upward thrusting dark rock. So we have these two very different, opposite directions, in fact, dynamic elements of this scene, which to me create this tension. It's just really compelling. So well done, Marv. I'm glad that you sent this in, and look forward to seeing more of your images. Way to go on that. All right, so our third image is back in the color domain. The title of this image is A Working Girl by Eileen McCausland. It was shot with a Canon 600D. There's no information on the exposure settings or the lens. Let's just go through a couple of things to catch my eye in terms of elements that might be improved, followed by some very strong positive features of this particular image. So to begin with, the thing that immediately catches my eye is the fact that the model is not centered in the arched doorway. And I'm wondering if it might be possible to reposition the camera, maybe back up a few steps, maybe stand on a step stool, so that this doorway arch actually appears directly over the model's head, framing her. The dark color of the doorway would provide a very nice accent to and frame to her hair. I think the side light on the hair here would still help bring it out from the background. The other thing is that we have this line which is leading along the wall, this hanging rack, I guess, and that appears to kind of come out of her head, as does the intersection of the arch, and those are both very distracting things to me, at least in terms of an immediate first impression. The second feature, and that's easily fixed during the composition of the shot. The second aspect of this image is that the overall luminance or brightness of the young lady is somewhat low. So let's see if we can fix that with the following trick. And there's many ways of going about this. This is just one way. The first thing I'm going to do is to make a duplicate layer of this layer. So as I've done here, so I have the background copy in the background. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the original background, which I've converted to a layer, I'm highlighting here, and I'm going to increase its exposure using the camera raw filter. Now the camera raw filter is the same one that was found in the Adobe Camera Raw interface, the ACR interface for raw files when we open those up in Photoshop. And Photoshop's now included the camera raw filter under the filter submenu, as you just saw. It's a very useful filter. Use it all the time in nightscape photography. It's got some very cool effects. But here all we're going to do is we're just going to bump up the exposure a tad. And what I'm doing, by the way, is I'm looking at her face right where I'm indicating. I'm not looking at the walls or the floors or the ceiling. I'm just purely looking at her face. And when I go back and forth and I decide, you know what, right about there is where I'd like her face to be. Maybe bring that down just a smidge, about there. I'm just going to click OK. So what we've done now is I turn off the top layer. We've got the slightly increased exposure bottom layer underneath the top layer. All I need to do is to put a mask. I'm clicking on the mask button right down here. Click on the mask button. Of course, I put that on the wrong layer, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go back to the top layer, and I'm going to click on my mask. And I'm going to come over here, and with my brush set to a fairly large diameter and a very low opacity. Look up here, I've got around 16%, somewhere in the 10 to 15% opacity range. I'm just going to come on over to the model, and I'm going to click once on her face, once. Click again here. I'm just going to slowly click on the model's area. You can probably hear the mouse clicking away here. And every time I do this, I remove, I guess, 16% of the top layer and reveal more of the underlying layer only in this area. So if I stop now and I take away the, I turn off the bottom layer, you can actually see the hole in the top layer, so to speak, the hole in the layer, the hole through the mask, which is why it's a mask. So let's compare these two side by side, the before and after. And I think when you do this, you'll be able to really see the difference. This is the one we just processed over here, and this is the original image. And if you look at it carefully, you can see that it's a very subtle effect, but the walls and the ceiling and the door and the floor are untouched. Those are exactly the same. All we've done is we've increased the brightness of the subject. And we can do many more things along these lines, but I just wanted to show you that basic technique. All right, so with that, let's just review the overall strengths of this image. It's a gorgeous image. I mean, the color scheme between the model's dress, the leading lines are all pointing in at her, and that's just right where the eyes go. Once we get to her, we see her eyes, and it takes us right out the window, And that's a beautiful, just a classic setup. A couple other kind of nice things that may or may not have been intentional, I think they were intentional, so way to go, is this very nice triangle between these dried plants. We have the bushes that she's holding right out the same window she's looking, so we have a nice little effect there. But the triangle formed by the plants on the wall, the line through parallax, the bushes that she's holding, and these plants on the floor, those 3 points make up a triangle with her at the apex. So this is another very powerful virtual element in this type of a composition. So overall, very nicely done. And like I say, the posing and the choice of props and everything is just really a nice image to see. So thank you for sending that in. All right, so moving on to the 4th image, we're back in the black and white range, and this image was sent in by Lynn Ronan. The title of this image is White Stallion. The camera wasn't specified, but we have a 210 millimeter lens with a crop factor brings it to 315 millimeters, Lynn reports. And the aperture setting here was f6.3 with an ISO of 500 at a shutter speed of 1/2000th of a second. So back in the black and white mode, and this is an awesome image to choose a black and white composition. We have the white stallion against the dark colored horses. Let me read the description that Lynn provides. This image was made at the end of a rodeo event. The day was bright sunshine, harsh light, and very dusty. Since the white horse stood out from the brown ones, I decided to convert to black and white and add a somewhat heavy vignette. Well, I think this came across marvelous. I only have a couple very small points. The first being that they all relate to the background and the foreground. So this area in the foreground of the sand and the dirt, we can just take that away. That doesn't really add anything at all to the image. And we can also bring in the left-hand side of the image to right about here, where we intersect the space between the front horse's legs. And at some point we're cropping off part of a horse, so I guess I feel okay in doing this. And there's a lot of parts of a horse here. You may decide this isn't what you like to do, and that's entirely, it's a personal choice. But I just feel that in doing this crop, that this brings us attention back onto the white stallion. I'm also noticing that these corral lines are slightly tilted, so I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this image to level those off just ever so slightly, just like so. And when I do that, I have the appearance of the horse is moving a little bit, maybe more horizontally, maybe even downhill slightly. But to me, that just works. That works well. We also have these white regions of the background, and I'm going to use the same lasso tool. I'm not a cowboy, but this is a rodeo, so I feel a little bit have to be careful using this. And we're going to do this content-aware fill again, this same content-aware operation. And we're just going to remove a couple of these. And again, I'm emphasizing, I'm not trying to fix this particular image. It's just looking for ways to compose an image to avoid these bright spots. So to see that, let's just compare these side by side. So we've got the before and after right next to each other. I'll bring this one back down to the same size. And just by looking at these small effects, leveling off the background, removing these white features, getting rid of some of this, to me it makes it just a tighter image and draws the attention into the white stallion. There's some issues potentially with mergers. I don't see anything we can do about that. I like how this horse is nuzzling this horse, but this is to me, I just love the way this is composed, so I wouldn't make any further changes in that. The strengths of this image are just the overall composition with the motion of the mane, the tail, the wind. You can really feel the breeze. The dust is being kicked up. I love how the white stallion's leg, you caught it just at the right position, so you really get the sense that it's on the move and just heading home after a long day. So that just to me comes across very, very effectively. So well done, Lynn, on this image. All right, so our last image to me is one that needs no changes, honestly. It's a bullseye image. It's got the main subject right in the center. Works perfectly. The water droplet, the title of this is Water Drop. It's by Michael Lee Mitchell, made with a Canon 7D, f11, ISO 400, 200th shutter speed. A lot went into this. We have a black painted bucket, which is why we have these black colors here. Michael says he used a Godox TT685C speed light flash with an X1C transceiver, and he bounced the flash, as he said, off a bag of colors. So I think the bag of colors was very well chosen between these oranges and the purples and the yellows and the greens. It's just a beautifully done shot. There's some real nice contrast between the nice sharp edge of the droplet and the fluid ripples just, undulating off into infinity. But to me, the kicker is this picture on the picture of the reflected light from the bag of colors refracting off the surface of the interior surface of the water droplet to produce this really nice little mysterious picture that's going on right in here in the head of the droplet. So that's just the coup de grace. Very nicely done. So that's it for the my critiques of this week's 5 submitted images. Thank you for sending those in, and looking forward to seeing more of the same.